I'm Gareth A Davies, and you're listening to another Fighting Spirits podcast. On this episode, I catch up with the Brazilian Andrew Parsons, the president of the International Paralympic Committee. The Paralympic movement is responsible for really changing seismically how disability is viewed in the world. It's a catalyst for huge change, and we're just a year away now from the Tokyo 2020 Paralympic Games. Here are the thoughts and aspirations of the Paralympic movement's president as we enter the last year leading up to 2020 next summer in Japan. It's lovely to speak to you anyway, Andrew.
Pleasure.
Yes. Let me ask you first of all. What does it feel like a year out from a big summer games in your role? It's your first. The summer games obviously there's a winter game, but the summer games is the crowning moment. It's when the world watches Paralympic sport, isn't it? You know.
Yes.
So what does it mark for you?
Well, yes, it's my first, summer games as IPC president. So it's an amazing honor, and of course, it's a big responsibility. And we have delivered the Pyeongchang Games, but as you know, the Winter Games in terms of scope and reach and the impact it has on the world is much smaller than compared to the summer. So, but the good, despite the responsibility, the pressure, and so on. The positive thing is that it's an honor, but another positive element is that I couldn't be luckier than working now with Japan and with Tokyo 2020 and the Japanese people, because the preparations are going really well in terms of not only of the services and the venues and the village, but also when it comes to the enthusiasm of Japanese society, from private sector to our partners, to the government, to the media, broadcasters in Japan. There is a big excitement around not only, let's say, Olympic Games, but also the Paralympic Games, the way it's being promoted and the way the Japanese society is aware of the Paralympic Games. They are proud of some of their athletes. They could, in some research that we have, and this is interesting, in Japan 1 year out, Japanese society in general, they can name more Paralympic athletes than the UK society could 1 year prior to the London Games.
Wow, that's interesting.
Yeah.
And
we all know that London was incredible from, let's say, it was a transformational event for the movement and for the world. So what we can see in Japan is that in the other side of the world, compared to London, we will have transformation events as well. So I'm super excited. From someone, as you have asked for, let's say, a more personal answer, for someone who started in 1987 as an intern in the Brazilian Paralympic Committee to be the route of my first summer games as president of the organization. First of all, it's a dream that came true, and I'm super enthusiastic about it. And I think we will have incredible games in Japan. I couldn't be more optimistic than I am now.
I mean, I don't want to rain on Rio at all, but it's I think everybody accepts that London was probably a watershed moment, a landmark moment for the Paralympic movement. I think you'd accept that, given the ticket sales, I think Tokyo is my 8th, I think it is, 7th or 8th, I think maybe 8th, and Summer Games, and it was, I don't think it was far off perfect, Do you feel that Japan is because of the heightened interest, that Japan could even overcome London as the best games, if you consider London to be the best games, by the way?
No, I consider London to be the best games. It's difficult to judge and to compare games, and I think sometimes there's obsession of saying this was the best games, the best Paralympic games ever, and so it can be a little bit unfair with some let's say cities and organizing committees. I think London brought us to a new level.
Yes,
and there is no doubt about it. And I think it was a kind of a perfect storm. Of course we know that it was not easy. Some people refer to London like it was easy, and it was not easy. For the organizing committee, for the different levels of government in the UK, for the IPC, the IOC. It was hard work, but it was very well planned. And we had some very good elements, like let's say the interest of the media. Channel 4 play an important role. The leadership of the organizing committee was fundamental for that. But if you think on Rio, and this is something that Philip Craven, my predecessor, said to me once. He said, in a way, I think that Rio was more important for the movement than London, because I think we were never as exposed as we were in Rio. So the success of the games was due to the athletes. So the venues were not, let's say, magnificent as Beijing. It was super challenged to get to the games. And believe me, Gareth, when someone says something about Rio, normally they say to me, "Oh, I'm sorry to talk about Rio like that. You're Brazilian." I said, "Well, I am probably the best person in the world to tell you how challenging it was, and how I was not desperate, but how concerned I was a few weeks prior to the opening ceremony." So I am the first one to recognize it was really challenging. So in these comparisons, Philip considers that Rio may be more important because the sport element, so the athlete performances were the key element in Rio, or not the only, but one of the only elements that were really, really good in those games, and of course the spectators and enthusiasm and the atmosphere. But everything else was really challenging. So Japan can do more than Rio, certainly when it comes to put the games together. But I think it's also the enthusiasm, but also the potential legacy that we have, because of course London brought the movement to a different level. So we can only go higher if we think on how serious the Japanese society are when it comes to not only the delivery of the games, but what to expect, the change that they expect about themselves. So this is a good thing about Japan. When we say that we want to challenge the perception of Japanese society towards persons with disability, they are the first ones to accept that they need to change their approach, they need to change their attitude. And the attitude is more of overprotection, is not, let's say, a negative in the sense that these people they don't deserve this or that. It's the other way around. Oh, we should protect them. They shouldn't stay at home. But this has a very bad effect that it does not see them as citizens like anyone else.
Do you think people with disabilities, Andrew, have been overprotected in Japan then?
Yes. It's what we have learned over the years now that we have been working with in Japan. That is, for example, Tokyo is more accessible than the majority of the cities in the world that I have visited. And even though it's accessible, has a good level of accessibility, you don't see persons with disability in the streets. You don't see them moving around, going to one place to the other. They stay at home. And this is so it's not because they don't have the means to move around. It's because the culture there is of this overprotection. They know you should stay at home. You should not expose yourself and go out there and study, be a professional, be a father, a wife, or a friend. I think it's something that it's not. It's a collateral effect of this overprotection. It's something that is very negative because when you're trying to protect them, you're marginalizing them at the same time because you're putting them outside of society.
That's fascinating because, I mean, your predecessor, Sir Phil, always I mean, I was going to ask you about that. He was always, his thing was always, as a trades union man, it was always, it's got to be athletes first. It's athlete led. That's what the games is about. And then the change in society comes as a result of. And so you're expecting another seismic shift in culture from the games, yeah?
Oh, I have no doubt. We already let's say, experiencing that. If you think, for example, that the partners are activating a lot of Paralympic athletes. So, for example, you see commercial campaigns with Shingo Kuniera, Yui Kamiji, top Japanese Paralympic athletes. They just elected 2 politicians with disabilities to the Japanese Parliament.
Wow.
We are seeing increase in the employment with disability. So I think this is an effect already of the games, and because we are, in a way, we are shaking. How you call it? Well, we are rocking the boat and shaking the trees, or whatever you want to say. Yeah. We are addressing the issues with them. We're saying, and they. But the positive thing is that they recognize that. So they are not denying, no, look, we treat them as anyone else. They know that, and they have a very big fear because they are an aging society. So they have this fear as a society that what will happen with Japan as a country in, let's say, 30, 40, 50 years' time, when, let's say, the vast majority of the population will be older people. So they know that they have to work on mobility. They know they have to make change this mentality of, well, if you cannot move around, or you need to stay at home and overprotected and so on. So they need to do something to address that. And then we also start discussing about diversity, which is, and let's say, is not something that is really high on the agenda. For example, it's not a country that is very open to foreigners, and this was a surprise to me in the early stages of the preparation, because I thought that the foreign population was going to be something big, as Tokyo is normally is seen as a cosmopolitan city, which is not. So I think inclusion and diversity is something that they are opening their arms to, and I think the Paralympics is something that is helping them to do that, and they want, as a nation, to use the Paralympic Games as a catalyst, more to, let's say, what we call the soft legacy, more to challenge perceptions, more to change legislation and use it to really embrace persons with disability, but some other groups as well, to be a more diverse society than focusing, let's say, on as it was the case on Rio, of the transport system and so on. Even though they have challenges in some specific legislations in the country, for example, in accommodation in hotel rooms.
Yeah.
This is again is a collateral effect. I don't know if you know, but the legislation in Japan currently says that if you have a hotel with 50 rooms or more, you have to have one accessible room. But it doesn't matter if you have 50 or if you have 500 rooms. It's one single accessible room.
Wow.
So, and this is because and this is a side effect, let's say, or a symptom of this thing of overprotection. They don't see persons with disability, let's say, doing tourism for leisure. They don't see them doing traveling for business purposes. So they don't see the need to have hotel rooms accessible for persons with disability. This is an interesting element. So when they overprotect, they don't include. So they exclude, thinking they are doing them a favor. But now they realize they are not. So I think if we will see, I like that word, seismic shift in the Japanese culture, and that's why we're targeting a lot of on ticketing strategy, targeting families. We saw that in London.
Yeah.
This big queues of baby strollers. We saw a lot of families coming. In the Paralympic Games, they are a very family-friendly event. Normally, the Olympics, they have a more international base of spectators, while we are more domestic ones. So that's why we're targeting a lot to have Japanese families at the venues and experiencing the Paralympic Games.
Yeah.
being together with the athletes.
No, it's funny because that was one of the major points that I'm not trying to praise myself here. It's one of the major points that I tried to stress to people like Lord Coe, head of London. Make £5 tickets for people to go to the park because to see kids in this country running like Richard Whitehead, or to see kids wanting to get into wheelchairs, we've noticed in our culture the change in the way very young people see people with disabilities. As you say, Channel 4 were very, I was helpful. I gave everything I could for London. I told them everything I knew. And as you know, the people moving and shaking in the Paralympic movement, we're not many, but we're dedicated in a way because we know the amazing change it can bring about. I mean, as I say, it's my 7th, by the way. And, when you were an intern in 87,
97.
97. 97. Okay. But when your two predecessors, Bob Stedwood and Sir Phil, they were both in the office for a very long period. Do you feel that you'd like to stay in for a long period? Because, a lot of shifting around doesn't help continuity. And do you have a long-term strategy? And what underpins your feeling about the ethos of what you want to bring as president of the International Paralympic Committee?
Well, thanks for the question. It's a very good one. I think no one who is elected to a position like I was elected thinks that one term is enough to implement the changes that you would like to implement. So, and I'm no different from that. I don't think that in 4 years I will be able to implement all the changes that I would like to implement in this movement. And it's a movement I'm absolutely passionate about. As I joined this movement when I was 20 years old. Yeah. So now I'm 42. So all my adult life was inside this movement. So it made me the man I am today, and I'm really grateful for the movement. So I want to give it back.
You've been involved from boy to man.
Exactly. Even my wife, I got to know her in the movement. She's a coach in para equestrian. So all my family, everything we let's say we are connected and interconnected with the movement. So, but I would say one of the things that I'm really passionate about is about the membership, because at the end of the day, the IPC, we cannot, I'd say, touch the athletes on a day-to-day basis. We have to do it through the membership. So we cannot, let's say, we have programs where we interact directly with the athletes, but I think we need to strengthen our membership. So, for example, the Burundi Paralympic Committee can offer better pathways and better structures and services for the Burundian Paralympic athletes. And it's the same in Burundi as in the US, as in UK, in Singapore, in Brazil. So we need to strengthen our membership base. We still have, let's say, a tier 1, top 15 national Paralympic committees or nations who offer exceptional good structure or pathways for their athletes. But, the second, third, fourth, fifth tier of national Paralympic committees, we are really far from that. And that's what I'm passionate about. When I was president of the Brazilian Paralympic Committee, we made a lot we have implemented many programs to support the growth of the Paralympic movement in Latin America, supporting our neighborhoods, but also in Africa, mainly targeting the Portuguese-speaking countries for obvious reasons. And this is where my passion lies, is to focus on, let's say, the developing nations and to get them to their next level. Of course, the next level of, let's say, the National Paralympic Committee of Morocco is different from the next level of the Australian Paralympic Committee. But if we can, let's say, take most or the large majority of the NPCs to their next level, I think we will be on a global scale taking the movement to the next level. And another passion I have is, and you can see that reflected, and it's not only my passion, but it's looking on the governing board as a whole. And you can see in our strategic planning that we just launched that we want to play a major role when it comes to the wider human rights movement. I think Philip was absolutely right when he said, we are a sport organization and it's about the athletes. But I think we got to a point where, under his leadership and under Bob's leadership, we became a very important and preeminent sport and efficient sport organization. And I think now it's the time that we can put this a little bit to the service of let's say, humanity, in the sense that we would like to make the Paralympic Games a more powerful tool to influence political change, to influence the way societies see the agenda of inclusion, of diversity, not only when it has to do with persons with disability, but also diversity in general. So I think we got to a point where we are mature enough as an organization and as a movement to play that role, but always through sport. This is something that should never change. It will not change during my time as president, at least, is that we are focused, because the more we focus on the sport element of it, the bigger is our impact on the social field. But we need to be, I would say, dialoguing and with the human rights movement, so that we can understand how we can better support them, or how we can engage, or if we can engage in some areas with them to maximize the changes that we want to roll. You know, our movement is a movement that uses sport to change society, to change the world, and we believe that engaging more and better and being more open to dialogue with the human rights movement, we will be amplifying the reach of this change that our athletes inspire. So this is where my passion lies. I would say the two biggest passions that I have is about strengthening the membership so they can provide better services to the athletes, and also that we can play a major role or a bigger role when it comes to human rights. And if I have a long-term goal, yes, I have, and it's LA 2028 will be, I think it will be a game changer for our movement. In the same way London was, in the same way I believe Tokyo can be in Asia. But of course, the US is a market where our presence is not that strong for many reasons, but it's one of the biggest markets when it comes to, let's say, broadcasting, fundraising, sponsorship, and we know the impact it has on the world when things happen in the US. So we have a very good chance now, possibility with LA 2028. That's why I have been in very close contact with the LA 2028 leadership and the Los Angeles leadership and the USOPC. Now, I don't know if you heard about it, but you know, the USOC has changed their name. Now they are called the US Olympic and Paralympic Committee.
Yeah, that's
so
good.
I think this is a step further.
It's a step in the right direction. Yeah, definitely.
So we see a good alignment of stars, if you want to use that image, that you know, we have a good opportunity with LA. We have the right leadership in LA 2028. The US market is something that we have to, our presence that is very modest, if I may say, and we see let's say the national governing body, which in that case is the Olympic and Paralympic Committee, changing its attitude and recognizing more, not more, putting in the same level Olympians and Paralympians. This change on the prize money for the medals is a good indication of that. So it doesn't matter if you're Olympian or Paralympian, if you get a gold medal at the game, you receive the same prize money. So they are treating Olympians and Paralympians, let's say, in the same way now. So I think we have a good alignment to LA in the same way we have a good alignment to London. So that will be, and if I am I have my 3 terms, which our constitution allows me. I will go until 2029. So LA will still be in my remit. So that's my long-term dream. But let's see how it goes. We still are a long way from that, and we first have to focus on Tokyo and then Beijing and so on.
One of the little notes that Craig Spence sent me was that Tokyo may well surpass London, which fascinates me. Did he mean in terms of ticket sales and revenue from Tokyo? Is that what the graph is showing? Is that what the projection is showing?
Well, I think in terms of ticket sales, yes, I think it has the potential. They will go on sale now on the 22nd of August, and we will see how the society responds in practical terms to let's say in buying tickets and wanting to be there at the venues. But I think what Craig refers to is a little bit more than that. Is the let's say in this festival of sport, which is the Olympics and the Paralympics, the role that the Paralympics play. I think they will be in London. We had this perfect combination of the Olympics bring something to the table, the Paralympics bring something to the table, and all of this together was known as London 2012.
Yeah.
I think we will see something similar in Japan, but maybe the Paralympic Games will be even more important and will have a more profound impact. I think this is what Craig is referring to. But again, it's so difficult to compare because we will be talking about something that happened 8 years after London.
Yeah.
And of course, when Japan got the Games in 2013, in the IOC session in Buenos Aires, it was 1 year after London. And London, again, was, to use your word, brought seismic shift to let's say, to the importance and the relevance of the Paralympic movement. So it's difficult. In one way, Tokyo will be building on the legacy of London. So, to compare which game will be more important and could surpass London. I think we have to focus on saying we want the best possible games to be delivered by the organizing committee, or games where the athletes they can have an incredible atmosphere, they can compete at the highest level, the best level of services. But we also would like to see the best impact on not only on Japanese society but in Asian society and worldwide. We will probably have more broadcasters than ever before at Tokyo Games, so the message will not be limited to Japan. Just knowing Craig,
yeah.
I think he's referring to the impact and the relevance of the Paralympic Games, not only on the ticket sales.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if you know, but I'm very involved in the fight world, yeah? And I was at a boxing event doing a radio show the other day, and I had a very famous actor from the kind of hit soap series EastEnders, which is like the primetime soap, and this guy is the kind of bad guy brother, and also had David Weir there as well. And as many people, and 7 years on, from David's great success, as many people wanted pictures with David Weir as they did with this guy Jake Wood. That's the kind of the werewolf of London. The legacies are amazing. They are extraordinary. I've got a few other things that I jotted down that you will appreciate are from someone who's been with it a long time. That leap of the other thing that I think you've got in Tokyo in your advantage is the athletic ability of Paralympians leaps so much every 4 years that it's probably, again, a greater spectacle in terms of what we're going to be actually seeing as sports entertainment than we've ever seen before as well, I imagine. Is that leap still going ahead?
Yes. And if you think, for example, on the big events we had in London, like, with Johnny Peacock, and by the time Oscar Pistorius and when Alan Fontella, the Brazilian kid, beat Oscar, and now we have this army of Blade runners, and so it's not only, let's say, 2 or 3 we are talking about, many athletes from different parts of the world competing at the even highest level than in London. And this is in not only, of course, in athletics, in many sports. We will see two new sports in Tokyo, the para badminton and para taekwondo, that it will be their debut in the games, but the level of competition is so high. And in some sports, as triathlon, for example, and this is something we need to work on, is that we need to have more, let's say, outdoor sports in the future of the Paralympic Games. I think this is an important thing to have in different. We have too many indoor sports at the moment, and we need to interact more with the city and with the country. But I think the level of performance is even higher than in London 2012 in many sports. Even in the sport, for example, of boccia, that it was a hit during the Rio Games. The performance level is surprising for who is not in the Paralympic movement, but who is not an expert in some of these sports, or even being in the National Paralympic Committee, to be surprised, because I think the more professionalism was injected in the National Paralympic Committees, and of course, London helped that in giving more relevance to the Paralympic Games. So governments will put more money, invest more money in creating national pathways and having, let's say, strategy to also win more medals at the Games. I think we will see unprecedented levels of performance in Japan, and I am particularly keen to see that on the female side, because this is something we have been working really strong, is to have more and well-prepared female athletes into the mix of heroes or stars in Tokyo 2020, and I think we will see that very clearly in 1 year's time.
It's 30 years since the. I think it's 30 years since the alignment with the IOC became much closer as well. That will not change, no?
No. Actually, I think right now we have most probably the best relationship ever with the IOC. The first agreement with them was in the year 2000, and we signed another one in 2001. It was still scheduled by then, and then we had another one, a big agreement in 2000, and London. It was signed right in the session right prior to the London Olympics. But we have signed during the Pyeongchang Paralympics last year a long-term agreement with the IOC that covers not only the aspects of the games and the delivery of the games, but more broadly our partnership with them, and it goes until 2032. So it gives this institutional, but also financial stability, and of course the stability that we will be having Olympic and Paralympic Games in the same host city at least until 2032. So I think we have a very good relationship. I have a very good relationship with Thomas Bach. We have a good relationship board to board. In many countries, we are seeing National Olympic Committees cooperating more with National Paralympic Committees. But we also have some interesting developments on a continental or regional base. So, for example, right now we are between the Pan Am Games of Lima 2019 and the Pan American Games in Lima 2019. This will be the fourth edition that the Continental Americas Game, let's say, is organized back-to-back. The able-bodied version and the para-sport version. It has been the same in Asia, and now in January next year, in 2020, we will have the first ever African Para Games organized and delivered by the same organizing committee that will deliver the All African Games now in August, in a few days' time. So it will be different because it will not be exactly back-to-back. We will have a few months of between the games. But it's the same organizing committee. So we see more and more this, not only, let's say, IOC, IPC, but Olympic, Paralympic movement. And this is very beneficial for us. But as the vice president of the IOC said last year in our gathering in Madrid, so Juan Antonio Samaranch Jr., he said, you should also realize, and he was addressing our membership, how important the Paralympic movement is for the Olympics. Because normally people think that, of course, the Olympics, they give us the opportunity to, be in the same host city. That is a financial contribution from the IOC towards the IPT. But he says, look, you are incredible, as a movement, you are incredibly important, even to justify the games, or you are the most, let's say, visible part of many aspects of what we call legacy, social legacy of the, let's say, of the overall festival of sports.
So the cities are not wanting the Olympics, but they are really wanting the Paralympics as well. They are bidding literally for the Paralympics. Is that what you're saying as well? That it's seen as the icing on the cake in some ways.
Well, I will not say that they are bidding only for the Paralympics, but I think we are bringing important elements to justify the bids and to justify the staging of the games. I think what we bring is something really important and relevant, but also something very it's crystal clear in our case. I would say the social impact that we have, and this is what sometimes governments are looking for.
It's 20 years, not 30. I said 30 just now that you've been aligned with the IOC, but as you know, as I obviously know about you, if you open the curtains, and it's the same. It's been the same for me. I mean, I've been a journalist for nearly 30 years with the Telegraph, and I do other things, TV and radio, and I do fight sports, and that's how I kind of make my living, if you like. But it's around this time, forgive my sins, with about a year to go, where I start to get excited about another Paralympic Summer Games. Okay. And because it's very exciting when you have witnessed a country or a society or a culture changing, because it's not just sport. It's bigger than sport. It's bigger than that. People, I'm starting to get the hairs on my body stand up right now, because it's deep. It's so deep, and that's why we love this. Why. I have a tendency to romanticize, and it's why I'm addicted to it almost. It fills you up spiritually for the next 4 years. It makes you, it restores your faith in humanity. It makes you, I always say it's an acid test. When I judge people sometimes on how they perceive what they're watching in the Paralympics. I can see how they're made as a human being. It might sound strange thing to say, but you can almost brings the goodness out in people. It almost brings out you can almost see through people on what their humanity is. I don't know if that sounds strange, but that's what it does to me. It's why I'm still involved with it. It's why I will still be involved with it. It's why in Rio, I wasn't at the Olympics. I was only at the Olympics for a week. But when I went to Rio for the Paralympics, it touched the Brazilian people. They had a different view on the Paralympics to the Olympics. After a couple of days, their feeling was, I get why this is here. I don't get why, with all the internal strife in my country, why the Olympics were here. What's the benefit? When the Paralympics were there, I saw people changing. I saw people from the countryside changing in Beijing. I gave you that example earlier from England, from London. It's so tangible, it's so visible that it just lights your fire again. Do you know what I mean?
Exactly. But I think I couldn't agree more with you, Gareth, and it's amazing to see that you have this enthusiasm and that you have noticed all of this around the world and this change. And in Brazil, I was here, and you're 100% right. The attitude has changed dramatically. And I remember Philip's words at the closing ceremony when he said, to the people of Rio de Janeiro, to say, you embraced these games and took the athletes to your heart. And it's exactly what happened. Yeah. And this is why it's so relevant what we do. But I think more and more people around the world, they are perceiving this now, and they want that.
The world's changed. The world in our time in the Paralympics, and we see it with #MeToo. We see it with women's rights. We see it with the way women are now in society. We see with what's coming out. We see the world changing. We see, you know, it's not as the world's. I think certainly the Western world is not as. It's changing. It's changing dramatically. The internet's changed things. Obviously, you've got your internet TV now as well, and you know and I think ultimately, I don't know if you agree with this, that the Paralympic movement benefits from all of this, the change in the world, you know, and is helping this change.
Yeah, I think so. And I see two things here, guys. One is that I would say I'm not as optimistic as you are, in the sense that I think a good part of the world changing to that and being more open. But we also have this danger of the polarization that we are seeing in different countries around the world. Yeah. But I think what we do is to combat that vision of this polarization of being, well, I'm against everything that is different from me. What we are saying with the Paralympic movement is that, look, you should embrace diversity. You should embrace different possibilities. You have to embrace who is different from yourself. Because this is the beauty of the humanity, of mankind. And this is what will make this world evolve. If we go the other way, so if we don't have, let's say, things like the Paralympics to counterbalance that, and we'll allow this polarization to dictate the way we live in the world today, in a few decades we will not have a world to live in. And I think elements like the Paralympics, because I think Paralympics is a highlight. They are our athletes are the embodiment of, you know, of what is good and what is beautiful in this world and what is right and what made you stand up a few minutes ago, even being sick, is this energy that we produce what the athletes they produce at the Paralympic Games. And this is why I think every city wants us. They want this. I remember speaking with a city that was not a candidate city a few years ago, in my first year as IPC president, the politicians of that city, and they came to me and said, look, we would love to host the Paralympics one day, but we don't think we need and we want the Olympics. And I tried to explain that, look, you know, that this vision was not right, even though it was flattering to hear them. I said, look, I think the combination of both is super powerful. Of course, we know what our athletes bring to the table, but it's a combination that is makes it even more powerful. So if you want to change in your city, in your country, that the Paralympics they can let's say generate, you need to bring the whole circus. I said to her at that time, and unfortunately they didn't at the games. But I think you're absolutely right, Gareth, in the sense that, you know, this is what the Paralympics bring, and it's something that you never find someone saying a negative thing like, well, it's unjustifiable to spend this amount of money to host the Paralympics, which in some cases you hear about the Olympics. I do not agree with those opinions, but I think we help a lot the Olympic movement as well. I think this is what I was trying to say, because of all this energy and all this positivity and all the good things and the good challenges that we bring, like we're doing with Turkey. We are, in a way, making them challenge themselves and address issues that they always had, but in a positive way.
Yes, final thing for me, the C word. It's always an issue. I mentioned the name Mr. Van der Vliet. The C word, classification. It's always the most complex thing. It's always the hardest thing to explain. It's always an issue that gets journalists revved up. How is classification changing? Are you still tightening up the evolving sphere of classification?
Yes, and I think, you know, I'm now almost 2 years as IPC president, and we have our General Assembly now in October, and it will be a clear message that I will give to our membership, is that we cannot keep doing classification as we have been doing in the last few years and the last decade. We need to evolve, because even though I think we have the classification code, we have good standards and policies in place, but as the Paralympic movement is becoming more and more relevant, we will be more exposed to cheating. We will be more exposed to the different interests in our movement, and this affects. And we know that the changing class affects a lot the medal potential of an athlete. So I think we must be prepared for that. And of course, we are expanding as a movement. So, for example, this year we had the Future Games in Darwin, Australia, and we have athletes coming from Vanuatu, from Kiribati. So we are expanding as a movement. So we need to change the way we do things, because first of all, we need, on the high end, I would say we need to focus a lot in preventing and fighting cheating, because of course this affects our credibility and it affects the very core of what we are as a movement. But on the other side of the spectrum is we need to service more athletes now in different parts of the world. So we are not, let's say, it's not only the big Anglo-Saxon countries anymore and a few countries here and there. We are in the Pacific Islands, we are in the Caribbean, we are in the Africa as a whole now. So we need to be able to decentralize classification services to a wider, I would say, population of athletes now. So we need to change, and this is something we need to tackle if we want to still be relevant as we are now for the future, and even more. But I think we have a good foundation, we have good rules, but we need to evolve. And we have been doing the same classification for the last few years, but we need to evolve. And I think the National Paralympic Committees and the international federations, they understand that, and so the athletes.
Andrew, it was absolutely brilliant to talk to you about the evolving diaspora of the Paralympic movement. Thank you so much for your time. It's really appreciated, and it's brilliant to talk to you with a year to go. It's certainly got me fired up.
Well, thanks for that, and it's always good to speak with someone who is so passionate about our movement, and I feel that when you're feeling better over a beer, we could speak for hours about our passion.
No doubt we will. Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Cheers, Andrew. Thank
Bye-bye.
you.
Take care.
Bye. Thank you.
You've been listening to another Fighting Spirits podcast with me, Gareth A Davies. I hope you enjoyed it. If you'd like to see more of my work, please go to my website, garethadavies.com, and subscribe to my newsletter. See you next time.